right. Well, welcome to Brandland. I'm your host, Garrett Justice with Lucidpress. And today I'm joined by a very special guest. I have Joe Martin, who's the GM and VP of Marketing for CloudApp. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm really well. How about you, Garrett?
Doing great. It's great to have you here. Love that background, showcasing some of that Southern Utah landscape back there. So
yeah, that's where I wish I was right now. We usually go to Moab, and we're not there. So
oh, yeah, I wish we were there. That's great. Well, Joe, again, we're super excited to have you here today and jump into our topic. Before we do, though, I want to make sure that our listeners have a little bit more understanding about you and your career, your background, and also CloudApp. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have kind of a background in data analytics. Finance was where I started. Then I went back to business school, and focused a little bit more on marketing. And that was kind of the path that I'm on now. So I took my love for data into marketing. I like marketing a little more because it's allowed me to be more creative and not be like regulated so much like you are in finance or accounting. So I kind of started with a startup called Neutron Interactive, learned a lot there. And from there went to Adobe for about 7 years. Did a lot of different roles at Adobe: content, social, data science, research, lots of different things. Really with the goal of kind of learning from a best-in-class marketing company to become, a CMO at more of a startup or mid-size business. I started using CloudApp probably a year and a half ago at Adobe and got connected with Scott Smith, the CEO, and loved the product so much. They had just announced an integration with Adobe. And so I did some consulting with them and decided to join the company because I loved it so much. So CloudApp is a visual communication tool. It allows you to create instantly shareable videos, screenshots, and GIFs. You can also annotate on the screenshots, and really it just creates a real clean path to asynchronous communication, which, managing a team at Adobe, I had people that I was managing in India and Singapore and Europe and the US. And you can imagine it was hard for us to all get in the same room at the same time. So CloudApp was really key to help us communicate visually, have that face-to-face connection, but not necessarily have to, be on a Zoom call.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can see definitely how valuable that would be for so many companies right now, as more and more are working from home, especially with, the coronavirus pandemic going on. I can see how that could come in handy. So I'm curious, before we jump into, what was that transition like between a big company like Adobe to this small startup? Like, what are your biggest takeaways? What are the biggest learnings you've had?
It was wild. So like the story I love to tell is day one, I'm slacking with Scott Smith, our CEO. He's in the Bay Area. I'm in Utah. And I'm sitting at this, WeWork style building, and I can still see the Adobe building, right? It's like in my peripheral. And I'm sending Scott a message and I say, hey, I don't really like our H1 on our website. Like, I think the headline can be better. And he's like, okay, what do you think, we should run with? And I said, well, maybe we can test this, and this. And he's like, okay, just a sec. All right, it's set up. And I was like, mine was blown. Like, first of all, Adobe, like, that was not even my lane, right? Like, if I brought up something like that, like, stay in your lane, bro. Like,
yeah,
no, you're not even on the website team. Like, don't even plug us. And even if I was on the website team, changing an H1 at a company as big of Adobe, like, you'd have to get CMO approval, maybe CEO approval. It'd have to be like fit in with the campaign and the brand team. And it'd be like a whole year process to get done. Yes. So that was kind of like, it summed up the good and the bad of switching. Cause I also don't have those, immense resources that I had at the big
company. No, I get that. I think that there's pros and cons of both, right? I had a similar experience. Before I joined Lucid about 5 years ago, I was at Target, the retail store at their headquarters. So really similar experience moving from a company that large, just to be able to run the show and kind of make your own decisions. So that's great.
That's awesome.
Well, Joe, I'm excited to get into our topic today. With your background and experience, I think, we're really excited to understand from and pull from that experience on our topic today about customer experience, and specifically how can the customer experience create loyalty for companies. I think that's a crucial part of, building a strong company and a strong brand. You want loyal customers that have wonderful customer experiences, but it can be challenging for a lot of companies, big and small, to know exactly how to do that. So as we jump into this topic today, my first question for you is, in a world today with so many distractions, I know you and everyone else out there who's worked in marketing has seen the statistics about how many ads you see every day and how much more content is being created in the world. So in a world full of distractions, how can a brand really stand out by creating and streamlining that customer experience?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to recognize is customer experience is kind of the new product. So there's tons of information out there about how I've seen something around 86% of buyers are willing to pay more for a great customer experience, according to PwC. Customer experience is the thing people are most excited about on the marketing side. So the validation is there. At Adobe, as a part of the kind of transformation from the marketing cloud to the experience cloud, and Adobe went, all in on the narrative of experience. And so I think the real key is to recognize that the opportunity is there, and also that no matter what business you are, you're competing on an Apple, Amazon, or I don't know, Chick-fil-A level, right? Like if you think of best in class loyalty and brand experiences, like coming to CloudApp, when I sign up for a new product, and same with Lucidchart or Lucidpress, like I expect what I do when I sign up for a product at Apple or Microsoft or Adobe. And sometimes I don't get that because they're much smaller and have less resources. So you have to try and figure out a way to provide that similar experience that a brand with maybe much more resources can provide, that your team can provide. So putting a focus on getting usage really quickly, getting someone up and running, like removing steps and barriers. Those are all really keys to kind of the initial customer experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to dive into that actually a little bit deeper. The next question that I have for you is, what is that DNA of a really good customer experience? I think you kind of hinted and started talking about some of those things right towards the end of your comment there, but what makes up a really good customer experience, and how can even small companies who don't have as many resources, like you mentioned, go about implementing some of those elements of, a strong customer experience?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different steps that is really the DNA of an experience that you've got to try and nail as a brand. And I've written about this a few times. The first is kind of just your initial website. People expect certain things. If you're retail, it's got to be really easy to, one, find what you're looking for, and two, look for upsells. So like Amazon is perfected finding really easily, but also having this long list of recommended products. So people are like, oh yeah, those shoes do look good with those pants. Or, I do need I'm setting up my remote office, so I do need a light with my microphone that I just bought, which Amazon's out of Yeti microphones. It's kind of funny. But first is kind of nailing that website experience, where someone comes in through search or social or whatever, and when they click on that ad or whatever, they land where they expected to land. Because if you paid, $1 or $2 for that person to come in, you don't want them to immediately bounce and leave your site because they didn't see what they expected. So nailing the website is kind of first and foremost. Then it's kind of on to getting them to purchase and the purchase flow. So if you may, like in a SaaS company, you may not have any brand recognition. So someone may be coming into your site and doesn't really know who you are. So if your purchase experience doesn't seem credible, and doesn't seem secure, and you're asking for a credit card and they don't really know who you are, you've got to, provide that safety and security that people expect on the internet and may not see from smaller companies. After that, it's kind of how quickly can I get to value? So if I'm downloading a free product, or if I'm, making the jump straight to a paid product, like I want to see value probably with almost instantaneously, right? If it's a SaaS product, I want to for sure see value within a couple of minutes. If it's retail, I can wait 2 days for Amazon. And then, different experiences there. And then lastly, I think is kind of one that maybe doesn't get brought up in customer experience, is kind of your last line of defense, which is customer support. And just being really obsessed with like NPS and feedback. Every team here at CloudApp, which we're pretty small still, but every team does like customer interviews, or not even just customers, people off the street interviews. Like we will literally go to either, there's like sites like User Testing or even just Craigslist, and just like finding someone off the street and having them come into our site and asking them questions about, hey, what do you think we do? Can you download the product? How, is it are you getting the value out of it quickly? Like what is missing here? And really just being obsessed with customer feedback is really important, and getting those support issues fixed as quickly as possible.
That's great advice. And I know you mentioned you've written about this before. We'll be sure to link to that in the show notes after this. So anyone who's interested in diving deeper in that, you can check out what Joe has written on that. So just to recap, it really starts with that website experience and then that purchase flow. What am I missing? I missed another step, and then ends with that support, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's so it's a purchase, security, and then actual value.
That's right. Getting to value quickly.
Yep.
So I'm curious on this, to dive a little bit deeper too. How have you done this at CloudApp? Like, what have you done, or what has your team done? You mentioned some of those interviews. I think that's an excellent place to start. What else have you done to ensure that you can have that seamless customer experience all the way through each of those steps?
Yeah, I think the real important thing is first the feedback, like we talked about. We had a great call with executive from like a local Utah company the other day, and she was kind of taking us through some of her use cases of CloudApp. And it's funny how you get different kind of struggles from people. And it's really like having empathy for what their frustrations are, and trying to figure out how to make that decision of which one to fix. So like you may have 20 people that are confused by one thing, but 10 people think it's okay. So you got to try and figure out, well, we'll go with the one that is most confused, right? So I think it's customer feedback, and then also just being obsessed with the product yourself. Like we have this leaderboard of usage at CloudApp, and Scott Smith is just like a madman. Like no one can touch him in terms of drops that he creates, videos and screenshots and GIFs every day. And, that's pretty cool as a company to see your ultimate leader being just obsessed with the product. And he's got his iPad and his MacBook and his PC laptop out, and he's using all different applications to see where there's issues, where there's friction, and really trying to lead how much we're using it, and making sure we're really dogfooding the product. And then after that, I think it's really like creating that community where people see that you're making changes that they may have asked for. So there's been cases like, I'm sure like any other brand, CloudApp gets hit up on Twitter quite a bit. And usually when people take to Twitter and mention your brand, it's not always a great thing. So we'll fix a something someone would like to have, or maybe fix a bug, and we'll like let them know, hey, in this new 6.1 release, we'll send them a DM or an email. Hey, in this new 6.1 release, it fixes, what you were asking for, a few months ago. Or we'll point them to like our public Trello roadmap board, and people can submit requests for new features on the roadmap. So I think it's all about transparency and really being as open as you can be, and really trying to connect with your community.
Yeah, I think those are excellent tips. Some of the things that really stood out to me that you mentioned is, number one, dog food. And I think that that's awesome. It's great that your CEO is doing that. I've noticed the importance of that too. The more you can get your team using your product and going through that typical customer experience, the more you see things that just stand out that are like, why are we doing it that way? Even if it's just walking through the whole flow and how it all fits together. One thing that our team did, our marketing team, about a year and a half ago, is we just took a quarter to kind of map out what that typical user journey experience looked like. And we found that, over time, as our team has grown, we have kind of segmented up. This person kind of controls this portion of the journey. This person kind of controls this one. And where those handoffs exist, sometimes those were the bumpy patches where it didn't really make sense. It wasn't that seamless. And so just walking everyone through and seeing what that experience is like has been super helpful. So I love those suggestions. Thank you for that. The next question I have for you, which I think really ties into, what you do at CloudApp so well, is how can visuals and video enhance that customer experience? I know, CloudApp is really all about that. It's about the visuals. It's about the video that you can do so easily within your platform. So how do those things help enhance a customer experience?
Yeah, I think a part of it is just recognizing that the majority of people are visual learners, and we're kind of the interesting thing about what we're going through right now is that how many thought leaders or businesses like Adobe's and Salesforce's and Microsoft's of the world have been banging the drum on digital transformation for 5 years now. And now within the last 5 weeks, I guarantee that more has happened in 5 weeks than has happened over the last 5 years, because it's, disruption leads to innovation or invention. And people are being forced to become digital. I loved seeing kind of Adobe, the transformation of becoming like video conferencing was the baseline. This was probably 2 years ago. We started using Blue Jeans, and everybody did video calls. So it's kind of a piece of really understanding how people want to be communicated to, and then also just recognizing where the trends are heading. I mean, if you look at a survey we recently did last fall of about 1,000 US office workers, showed that a majority of both Gen Z and millennial workforces were working remotely the majority of the time. So, you have the Bay Area is insanely expensive, and New York and Chicago and Florida, like the very populous Texas, Austin is exploding. The populous areas are too expensive for a new graduate, even if Google's paying you $48 an hour as an intern, which is what they pay, which is insane for us in Utah, right? They can't afford to live in Mountain View or even in, Sunnyvale or San Jose. Like, they've got to be almost an hour away. So you add in a commute, and you add in kind of the wear and tear on that, and that leads to people saying, you know what, I'd rather just work remote if you're going to support me doing that. And now we're all working remote. So businesses are creating playbooks right now that they didn't have before on how to support remote work. And you can't always jump on a Zoom call. So, visuals, other visuals and video like async communication is really helpful to kind of tie into Slack. And then obviously with your marketing, there's tons of studies on engagement with videos and images versus just text. So much so that Facebook basically eliminated text from its platform. Like text pretty much died. And if you look on your feed on Facebook, it's all like articles and visual based now versus text. So
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, that
just
makes
jumping on the
sense.
trend.
No, that's great. And I think that what you mentioned too is the trends, the macro trends here. Like these aren't just trends that are specific to software companies or certain verticals. Like these are trends that are across the board that are happening in marketing, and being able to identify those and realize that that's how people want to work and that's how people want to consume your content leads you to need those visuals and that video to really enhance and meet the expectations that customers have as they consume your content, or that your employees have as they work remote and need to work together. So
Yep.
that's excellent. Last question I have for you on this topic before we wrap up here is, we talked a little bit about some of those principles of customer experience. How does this all tie back into building a strong and lasting brand? As the title of our podcast is Brandland, and we interview lots of different marketers across all industries about how they can build strong and lasting brands. So as we think about these principles of customer experience, how does that tie back to brand for you?
Yeah, well, I think we live in an age of reviews, and I know Lucidchart and Lucidpress are both ranked really high on G2, and CloudApp is also ranked high on G2. And people look at those things, like Adobe was obsessed with like the Gartner Magic Quadrants and the Forrester Waves and these reports that came out quarterly. And the reason why they were obsessed with those things and made such a big marketing deal is because they were impactful. I mean, you send a customer this validation, and they're a part of the highly ranked team, right? They're a part of this like community that is winning. People want to be a part of something that is winning and not losing. So if there's kind of that validation and social proof from these reviews, that has long-lasting benefits. And there's also just some really great, like best-in-class communities that I'd like to try and mimic at CloudApp. GitLab is one of the great ones. They've and GitHub as well, that was acquired by Microsoft, but they're both excellent at kind of bringing a good community in. And then one other group that I've been talking to was Magento, who Adobe acquired. At the time that Adobe acquired Magento, I was managing a team that was kind of doing social data analysis, and the negative sentiment for when Adobe bought Magento was like wild, because they're like, same for like Microsoft and GitHub, because their communities are like, oh no, like this giant is buying this really cool, open source product, and they're going to totally ruin it. And that was pretty cool to like see, because it's like this really pretty small company compared to a Microsoft or an Adobe has this just like viral community that is defensive and loves the brand. And that's because they listen to their customers, they provided a good product, and they're part of the winning team because their customers want to give them reviews and want to give them good NPS scores.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think, when it comes back to it, building a strong brand is about something. It's about trust. Brand is really about trust. And that's what really stood out to me. It's, you're talking about those reviews. How can you build trust with the people that want to buy from you? And that's what it's all about when building a strong brand. And so all of those things, I think, add up, and even those small micro things, they add up, and they either enrich or undermine that brand over time. So love it. Well, Joe, this has been so awesome. Thank you for taking some time with us today. As we kind of wrap up here, what's something that our listeners can take action on today that can help move them towards success based on the topic that we discussed?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is I think you need to, experiences don't just happen. So you need to have someone who is owning it and really championing it. And that's going to be easier at smaller companies, a little harder at bigger companies, but you can make an impact if you want to show that customer experience is where your company should go. The immediate thing I think you can do if you feel like you may not have impact at a massive company is telling your new hires to just like break everything. Like that's one of the things I tell everybody I've hired since I was started hiring, 10 years ago, was like, I want you to assume that everything I've set up is the worst. And like there's better ways to do things. Like I'm by no means the expert on all things on my team. So I want you to come in with fresh eyes and ask questions. And you brought up Garrett a couple of times about just being curious and asking questions and like, why are we doing it this way? If you don't enable your teams, especially new hires, to do that, then it's just going to be a whole bunch of yes men that are following someone who probably may not know what they're doing in the first place. I love new blood coming into the company and being like, hey, we don't believe we're doing everything right. Like come in with ideas. And I tell everybody to open up a doc and just like unload everything they think is maybe could be better. And then that is something you can draw from for like, I actually still have a doc that I did when I came into CloudApp. I'm still drawing ideas from and thoughts from a year from when I started. So
Yeah.
it's good to have that fresh perspective and you never get it back, right? So like enable those new hires to just destroy everything along with keeping the product stable, obviously, but destroy everything in terms of ideas. Like just be really curious and ask questions. And, that really starts from the top where leadership is kind of open to, the lowest analyst asking, why are we, doing this thing on this piece of the business to, an executive.
Yeah, makes total sense. I think that's great advice. Like what you said, it really comes down to creating that culture of so people feel comfortable and empowered and like they should be doing that, going about breaking things. So Joe, again, this has been awesome. Thank you for just the wealth of knowledge and insights that you shared with us today. What's the best way for our listeners to stay connected to you or reach out in the future if they have questions?
Yeah, definitely connect on Twitter if you're there. Jody Marty is my handle, and then LinkedIn on there as well. Those are probably the two best places to get a hold of me. And hopefully, you're able to get some value out of following me there as well.
Well, thank you, Joe. We'll be sure to drop those, your Twitter handle and LinkedIn in the show notes as well so people can have those. But thank you again for taking the time today, and we wish you the best. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, man.